I'm going to add 6 new golems, each with adorable animations and special powers that I can craft in my world. And I'm going to make this available as a data pack that my patrons can download and play with. From the oak golem to the obsidian golem, can I get them all to work how I want? So here in Blockbench, I think this is the model we're going to start with for the oak golem. It's got a very simple body shape, basically just the one cube, and then we've got 2 legs, and I gave him a little bit of a straw hat because I thought that was pretty cute. We are making this with Animated Java, which is a plugin for Blockbench that will let us export both the model as well as these animations as a resource pack and data pack so that I can spawn the model in the world as a bunch of item displays. Let's take a look at how that works. Okay, so this should spawn the model. Perfect. And let's see if the animations worked here. Okay, good. So we've got the idle animation dancing around. Very cute. So let's stop that. And now we'll try the walking animation. Perfect. So right now, he's not much more than a fancy statue. We still need to add in the behavior so that he actually follows us and stuff. But before we do that, I think we're going to make this an item so that we can spawn it more easily. So for that, I copied the model over to an item model in Blockbench and set up the display settings so it looks right when it's in your hand, when you're in first person mode, when it's on the ground, all that stuff. And yes, that is a lot easier to work with. So I haven't set up his animations yet. He's basically just going to sit still, occasionally look at us, and then follow us as well when we start getting out of range. Imagine this thing just following you as you're playing the game. But then when he gets close enough, yeah, he stops, and then this is when he would play his idle animation, and yeah, he'll just randomly kind of look at us, almost like a regular companion mob. So let's get those animations added. All right, let's give it a shot, and perfect. So he is within range of us, so he's just going to play his idle animation, but then if we start walking away, he's gonna follow us. Look at that, oh my gosh, look at him rocking back and forth, he's so cute. And then he gets close enough, yep, and returns to his idle animation. Perfect. I love that I added his nose moving too. This is just going to be such a cute project. I'm very excited for how far we've come even just now. Okay, now that we've got this little guy moving and animating, let's test him out and see how he really behaves in an obstacle course. Okay, so here we have our obstacle course. We're going to start with just a simple step, and then a couple of steps up. Then we have a bit of a wall that he's going to have to navigate through, and then a new staircase going to the side is going to navigate up, and then for the final challenge, a big spiral staircase. Now, of course, this oak golem can only follow us. He doesn't actually have pathfinding like a proper wolf or creeper or something, so it's going to be up to me to guide him through here, but it's also going to be a good test of if I've given him the abilities to follow me through here correctly. So we'll spawn him right here. All right, buddy, I know you can do this. It's a very simple obstacle course. Just follow me and you'll be fine. Okay, so he's gonna come up, jump up with those stairs, good. He's coming up those stairs, ooh, he's fast, he's great. Okay, getting stuck on this wall, perfect. That's exactly what we want to happen because we want to guide him through here now. And then he's not able to come up that step. We have to guide him over here first so that he can come up here. So let's take him back over here, guide him over, great, falls down. And then we gotta get him in position so we can take him up the spiral staircase here. It's gonna be the ultimate challenge. Ooh, that's tough, okay. Okay. Oh, not quite. Come on, little guy. He did it! All right. Great job, little guy. You did great. Sorry for dropping you so many times. All right, there's just a few more features here for this oak golem before we need to move on. So I've gone ahead and added a very, very tiny pig riding on the animated Java model. That's going to be what other mobs will be able to target if they want to hurt it. And it'll also handle the health. In theory, we could have used a pig or some other mob to handle the AI for the mob as well and had the animated Java model ride that, but that would require a little more work on the modeling side, and I don't feel like it's really necessary. I think we got it pretty on lock. I've also gone ahead and added an interaction entity around the animated Java model. It's actually riding on the model, same as the pig, which you can still see the little line for down there. This way players hopefully won't be able to hurt their own golem by accident, but it also gives them a way to relocate them. So if the owner hits it 3 times, then it drops as an item. And we see the particles for the pig dying, which I think is perfectly fine. I actually kind of like that here. Okay, so we're going to spawn a golem as well as a husk, and we're going to make it so the husk thinks that the golem attacked it. Now the golem doesn't have an attack, so it can't fight back. It's just going to kind of take that damage, might run away a little bit, but otherwise it's just going to die, and I think that's totally fine. Most of the time this isn't going to happen with something like the oak golem, but it's going to be really important to have that foundation for future golems that we'll be fighting. The last thing we need to add for this oak golem is its actual power, since right now it mostly just follows you around and doesn't do anything else. Since I'm going to be using this in a survival series, I think I'm going to make it so that every so often it just spawns some food from a loot table. Just like that. It'll pop out of its head and we get a little bit of bread. Sometimes we get some carrots. I think that'll work out well. I don't think it's going to be so common that it'll be too powerful, and I also made it so it only does it while it's idling, so it won't leave a trail of food behind us as we're walking. But since I'm making this for a video survival series anyway, being a little bit OP isn't too big of a deal in pursuit of good content. That's it for the oak golem, so it's time to move on to the sandstone golem. My goal is for all of these golems to have a little bit of a different body shape, so for this one, instead of having some legs and no arms, he's actually got 2 arms but no legs. And we can see how that plays out in the animations here. So the idle animation, he's kind of rocking back and forth, which I think is super cute. And then walking, he's actually going to roll around on his arms like this. This is also a golem that is going to have an attack and fight mobs for us. So this is what its attack animation is going to look like. It's going to kind of whip them with its butt here. Once again, I made an item to spawn this more easily to confirm everything is working right. So let's get this guy in here. Excellent. Rocking back and forth, playing his idle animation, looking good. I was able to copy most of the behavior over from the oak golem with regards to how it moves and idles and stuff. So we can see he's still turning and facing us every so often kind of randomly, but otherwise we can get a good look at his back and such. Let's try walking around, make sure he follows us. Awesome. Rolling around on his legs. I think that looks so smooth. Really happy with how that turned out. He's a little bit slower than the oak golem. I tried to time it up with the way that his arms are moving. So again, I think that just looks really smooth. Very happy with that. He does still have the pig and the interaction entity already as well. All of that was copied over. So it's just a matter of implementing his unique abilities. So like I said, this is actually a golem that's going to attack mobs and fight for us. But I've actually made it so that it isn't going to attack mobs unless they hit us or we hit them first. So that way it doesn't go running off randomly. Let's hit that and see how that works. Perfect. Playing that attack animation, stopping when it does so. Added some particles for that, and yeah, awesome. He's got some knockback on him, so a little bit harder for those mobs to be able to hit him. Let's try again here real quick. Okay, so they can get in, they can hit him a little bit, but it's targeting the pig accurately, which is perfect. Now I think just to make this a little bit more interesting, I'm going to have it so that it has a chance to set the mobs that it hits on fire. So let's see how that works here. Perfect. I think that feels appropriate for a sandstone golem being so related to the desert. Clearly has some inspiration from the desert pyramids. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how this guy has turned out. Now at this point we have 2 golems but no way to obtain them, so I think it's time to move on to building the golem factory. Now I'm going to make this add-on available for my patrons, and I'm going to use it in my upcoming New in Town series, and so I'm going to integrate it as a New in Town add-on. So that means I need to build it on this plot and add a recipe for it so that it can be built as part of New in Town. Now unfortunately at the time that I'm recording this, both Replay Mod and World Edit are not yet updated to Minecraft 1.21, so I'm going to have to build this by hand the old-fashioned way. I started with a foundation of Deepslate tiles for the floor and Deepslate bricks to line the walls. I wanted a bit of a boxy main room where we'll end up making the golems, and then kind of a large archway entrance. Once I had the base shape, I swapped most of the build to tough bricks so that we could have a sort of transition from Deepslate up to tough. Then I added the roof and smokestacks up here, and filled in some copper on the outside to add just a little bit more detail and depth so we're not just left with a big stone box. After lighting up some of the interior and building this neat little furnace and conveyor belt going down, the details were pretty much done. It was just time to add some pathing back around the outside so that it integrates more nicely with adjacent plots in New in Town. Okay, so here we have our golem factory. It takes some inspiration from the builds from my previous series, primarily the trading hall from the Abandoned Tower series and the smeltery from the Secret Shop series. We've incorporated some Deepslate bricks and tough bricks, as well as a bit of cut copper and copper grates in here, and we borrowed the smokestacks from the trading hall from that Abandoned Tower series. Inside we have sort of a conveyor belt situation I got going on. I thought that would make sense for a factory type situation. These cut copper pipes go up into the smokestacks here, and the conveyor belt ends up going into this composter, which I thought sort of looked almost like a shipping container perhaps. Now this alone is not enough to make sense for how we get the golem, so for that we need to make a golem workbench. And here's what I came up with for that. We've got some pipes here, very classic, similar to pipes from some of the Secret Shop items, and I also incorporated some gears here to just spice up the sides. So each side is just a little bit different. We've got our front face here with the gear on the front, and I put a gear on top as well with the crafting space here. So let's get this in game and implement some functionality. So I've gone ahead and just made a spawn egg to place this down because it's only going to be obtainable here in the structure. So let's place that here. Okay, and we see the item model is perfectly positioned and covering a crafting table here. So the way that I want these golems to be obtainable is I want them to be craftable in a crafting table. But ideally, I want people to be incentivized to craft them here rather than elsewhere. So the way that I have this working is if you open a normal crafting table and search for golem in the recipe book, you see that you don't have those recipes. But if we come up to the golem workbench, then we see that we do gain those recipes. Right now, just the oak golem and the sandstone golem, and we can search them up in the recipe book and be able to craft them here. And then if you walk away, then you lose those recipes and you're not able to craft them anymore. Now, of course, unless you're playing with the game rule so that recipes are required to craft things, you could still memorize those recipes and craft them elsewhere, and in theory, in future playthroughs, not even build the golem factory. But where's the fun in that? We'll come back and test this as new in town and make sure that we can craft it later. For now, let's get back to the golems. So next here is the Deepslate golem, and once again I wanted to try for a different body type. So this is the first golem that has 2 legs and 2 arms. He's also a very short, stout body, just a body with no separate head. And I gave him these nice diamond eyes, kind of a little bit of an eyebrow situation going on. He's kind of got a little bit of attitude, which also comes in with his idle animation here. We can see it's sort of like, a little bit of a sigh there, which I think is really cute and very smooth there, how I got those arms. His walk animation as well, he's kind of got a little bit of a rocking situation, not too dissimilar from the oak golem, but he's also swinging his arms back and forth as well, and his nose swings too. He's also going to have a special power that is going to use this charging animation, which is just going to play once. He'll kind of reach out with his arms there, and we'll see how that plays out once we get this guy in game. So to start out, we're going to place down our golem workbench, and I've gone ahead and added his recipe here so we can make sure that works. And we do see that we get our Deepslate golem here. So let's place him down and make sure everything migrated over properly. Yep, so he's got his idle animation, turning to face us every so often, and we can see that he's walking along. He's a little bit faster than the oak golem. I tried to time it with how quickly his feet move, but since they are so small, it was a little bit hard to get it just right, but I think this turned out okay. So for this Deepslate golem, you may have noticed that we used a blast furnace in the recipe, and he's also got a little blast furnace cover on his back there. I want this golem to be able to smelt items that are on the ground. So for example, if we toss some iron on the ground, he'll walk over to it. Great, and we see that he immediately smelts it into an iron ingot. And we can even leave a trail and he'll go after each one at a time. Perfect. And he can even do a whole stack of cobblestone, for example, all at once. Obviously that is pretty powerful, so I think we're going to try and add a cooldown to this so that he has to wait a few seconds before he can move on to a different item. Okay, and now if we leave a trail of gold nuggets, you'll see that after he does one, he's going to walk straight over to us and then go and find the next closest one. And he'll keep moving back. Obviously, if he's close enough, then he'll just start idling. But then once his cooldown is over, he'll move over to the next one. We may modify the exact length of the cooldown after we do some survival play testing, but at least for now, everything is working, so any changes there will come later. This turned out to be a pretty easy golem, so I think at this point we are ready to move on to the brick golem. And here's what I've come up with for this guy. You can see he's quite a lot larger. Once again, has 2 legs, 2 arms, but they are a lot bigger, and his head is separate from his body, although it's sort of on the front rather than on top, which I think looks pretty good and sort of makes him feel really heavy. I didn't want his texture to be entirely bricks. I thought the red would be just a little bit overpowering if it covered the whole thing. So you can see I added in some of these darker reds from the red nether bricks, these dark prismarine brick colors, and then these gray bricks too, which I pulled the colors from the mud block for. For his animations, once again, I wanted this guy to feel like he was really heavy. He ended up coming out a little bit sad, I think, but his idle animation just kind of has him swaying back and forth pretty slowly, but his arms swinging a little bit independently from his body. I think that turned out really nicely. And then for his walking animation, he is walking pretty slowly and in fact is so heavy that he has to use his arms as well for support as he's moving. And that turned out really cool. And then for his charge animation, like the Deepslate Golem, he's going to play this when he uses his special power. And this just has him set both of his arms down into the ground a little bit, one at a time. This offset kind of turned out really nice, I think. And then his head is going to kind of crash down as well. And that's obviously going to get spiced up once we add some particles and things. So let's see how this guy turned out in game. Okay, we can go ahead and spawn this guy in. And yes, this looks really nice. He's not quite as big as I was expecting, but I do think being just shy of player size is a great place to be for something like this. If we made him too big, I think we would have to add some additional collision checks for when he's walking through blocks so it doesn't look super weird. But at this size, I think a little bit of clipping would be perfectly acceptable. Now for the Brick Golem's power, I wanted him to sort of be a bit of a support golem. So he's actually going to cause other golems that you own to have these green kind of sparkly particles playing around them. And this is just going to indicate that it is giving them some additional armor. For something like the Oak Golem, that doesn't really matter, but for the Sandstone Golem and any other golems we have that are going to be able to fight mobs for us, that's just going to give them a little bit of extra durability. And of course, that's just being done by adding an armor attribute modifier to the pig that is riding on them, since that's what hostile mobs are going to actually be targeting. Now, in addition to providing armor for the other golems, I also want him to occasionally heal his owner, which is when he's going to use that charge animation. So let's go ahead and add the code for that. Okay, so we are now in survival mode, and that way we can deal ourselves a little bit of damage so that we get below the health threshold that he decides he wants to heal us at. So let's go ahead and deal some damage. And we see immediately he's going to play that animation, have some particles around him to indicate he is getting ready to heal us, and start doing that. Now the only problem is he's going to keep repeating that until we are above that damage threshold. So if we dealt ourselves like 12 damage, he's just going to keep doing that. And that's not quite what I want to happen. So I think first we're going to try and add a little bit of randomness to when he decides to heal. So it's not just immediate as soon as you get below the health threshold. Okay, so let's deal ourselves 12 damage again and see if that fixes that. And yeah, so he's not doing it right away. It's going to be a little bit before he decides that he's ready for us. Here we go. Okay, so not too long. You definitely can't rely on him, but it's not too powerful. Now the other thing is, we just saw as soon as he finished healing us the first time, almost immediately after that he healed us again, and that's just a little bit too fast. We don't want him to be overpowered, we just want him to be a supporter. So we're going to go ahead and add a cooldown for this guy as well. Okay, so this one should be just a little bit longer than the one we used for the Deepslate Golem. And we added some particle effects on his head as well to indicate when he is recharging. And yeah, almost as soon as that's finished, we don't have to wait too long to get healed again. We can go ahead and test again. And yeah, so still a little bit of randomness for when he decides to use that healing power. We get healed. He does his cooldown with the particles. And then we can wait a little bit longer for him to heal us again. Yeah, I think this guy is working perfectly. We've got everything that we wanted out of him. So I think we can move on to our next golem here. All right, so this is our bone golem. He looks a little bit strange, especially compared to a lot of the other golems. It's a very unique body type that I wanted to try for this guy, and I'm not entirely sure how it worked out, but I do think I'm happy with it. He's basically got one big body for his rib cage, and obviously that's going to be see-through. And then he also has the head that is separate, which I'll show you over here in the animations as to why. So his idle animation, he's just kind of rocking back and forth. He's a little bit jittery compared to some of the other golems, very intentional since he is a bone golem. But if we move over to his walking animation, we can see that his head, his whole like upper jaw just kind of flaps in the wind as he's waddling about. I felt this was really appropriate for his body type, and it's definitely the vibe I wanted to go with, almost like he's kind of a Muppet or like a puppet of some kind. I think I'm really happy with how it turned out. Now, this is also going to be a golem that is going to fight for us. However, unlike the Sandstone golem, he's actually going to have a ranged attack. So his attacking animation has him charging up and then throwing something. And that we'll figure out once we get this guy in game. To start with though, let's get this guy summoned and make sure his normal idle and walking animations are working great. And that appears to be the case. Yes, excellent. So next up is to add in his attack. Okay, we've got our golem here. Let's go ahead and spawn a husk and we'll hit it. And perfect. We see that he throws a bone at him. Awesome. He's not too accurate, but I did give him a cooldown so he isn't super just like spamming his bones. And of course he does run away and run towards us when he's not fighting. Since he doesn't have a melee attack, he's got to rely on that range. But we saw there, it only took 3 or 4 bones to be able to take out a husk, which I think is pretty good. Now, of course, throwing 1 bone at a time isn't going to be incredibly helpful if you're being swarmed by mobs, but hopefully he should do some to help out, even in situations like that. Let's spawn a couple of husks to try out, and since husks kind of work as a team, as soon as we hit one, all the other husks should start targeting him, and he's gonna try to run away as best as he can. We'll see how he handles this big group here. Oh yes, they're going for him. Definitely going to have a hard time against this quantity of mobs, especially as they get closer and closer to him. He's going to try and target that closest one, but fortunately the bone projectiles can hit multiple mobs, but it looks like he's no match for like 8 husks, which I think is fair. I don't know that I would be either. But overall, I think I'm happy with this guy. You'll have to let me know if you like this sort of Muppet body type that I went with for him in the comments. But since I can't see the future, I think we'll just go ahead and move on to the Obsidian Golem. Okay, this was definitely the hardest golem that I've had to make so far. Since I still wanted all the golems to have a little bit of a different body shape, I ended up going with a spider for this guy. So he's got 4 legs, which right now, since this is sort of its item form, are kind of T-posed like this. He's also got another portal texture in there, which is going to animate. We should be able to see that here. Yeah, so in-game it'll animate just like a normal portal, and I think that's going to end up looking really nice. Now, of course, the animations are where we're going to be able to see those legs down on the ground like this, and we can see how that plays out right here. So he's kind of rocking up and down. I wanted a lot of motion here, but I didn't want it to look like he wasn't really attached to the ground. So we can see that the ends of the legs, his feet here, are pretty glued to the ground, staying pretty much still, and it's his body and the shoulders that are the ones that are moving. And I think that turned out pretty good. Now, his walking animation was pretty tough. I revisited this probably 2 or 3 times, and while I don't know that this is exactly perfect, for the level that I'm at, I think that it turned out pretty nicely. You see that the 2 opposing legs pretty much move in unison, and they're going to kind of sweep back on the ground as the Obsidian Golem is moving along with it. Getting its speed right to match this is going to be the hard part. Okay, let's get this guy spawned in. And perfect, yep, we see that the portal is animating as expected. He's sitting on the ground here, idling perfectly, occasionally facing us, just the same as all the other golems. Now let's check that walking animation. So I ended up making him pretty slow. I think that might actually be too slow. Let's try ramping that up a little bit and see how it looks. How does this look? You know what? I think that ended up getting too fast now. Let's try meeting halfway. Okay, how does this look? I think that's as close as we're going to get. It is still just a little bit derpy, a little bit weightless, but I think this is going to feel the most comfortable without getting a really, really specific decimal speed. I do think he looks really cool, so let's go ahead and get his special ability added in. So this is also going to be a mob that fights for us. However, instead of having a melee or ranged attack, it's actually going to be something a little bit more magical. If we go ahead and get a husk spawned in and attack it,
then any moment now the Obsidian Golem should start projecting some particles. Here we go. So we're going to get some particles around the husk and particles around the Golem, and then it's going to teleport it into the air. It's about 8 blocks or so, so it does sort of look like it just gets yeeted into the air, but actually it's a teleport, which I think is appropriate for it being, so closely themed around portals. But yeah, we see it get launched up in the air. When the husk gets teleported, it is getting damaged, and of course it also takes the damage once it hits the ground too. And if there are several husks in the area, or several possible targets, if we hit all those, then it's going to pick a random one to attack and teleport each time. So any moment now it should target another one. There we go, so that one way over there. Whee! Awesome. And then just to keep it consistent with all the other golems, I already went ahead and added a cooldown for this guy like with the others. Now what I am noticing is that the husks aren't attacking it once they get hit, which they should be because they're still taking damage from it just like any other golem. So let's check on that real quick. Okay, I think I figured it out. I was just accidentally making it so that the husk was targeting the animated Java model and not the pig that was riding it. So now when the Obsidian Golem teleports it, once it lands, if it still has health, yep, should target the pig and gonna try to run away since it doesn't have a melee attack. But then the Obsidian Golem can help take it out. And of course, in a survival scenario, we would be helping defend the Obsidian Golem too. Now, the last thing that I want to add, I want to have the Obsidian Golem also serve to protect us a little bit. So I'm going to make it give us a resistance effect, a pretty strong one in fact, resistance 3, and that's just going to linger for as long as the Obsidian Golem is out. And of course, if we were to break the Obsidian Golem, then we would lose that effect. Now, I do think I'm going to go ahead and turn the particles off of this, because otherwise I think they would get really annoying and sort of be in the way. And with that, we now have all of our golems implemented and working, all of their powers added the way that we want them. So, time to take these guys into a survival world and see if the New in Town recipe works. Alright, so loaded up a new world with New in Town, so we'll just fly off and find a good spot to set up a town. And this isn't normally where I would settle, but it'll work for testing here. Okay, so we have our town and everything. Let's real quick check our advancements. And yes, so we have the custom crafting recipe in here that we can use in our site planner. And we'll grab a building permit from the chest here, and we can plop that in there, and we'll see if it builds. Perfect. Yep, builds perfectly, rotates correctly. All of that's handled by the New in Town add-on system, so no surprises there. We do have the Golem workbench right inside, so if we step up to it, yep, perfect. We get all of our recipes. And let's try crafting a brick golem. So we should just need 6 bricks like that, a carved pumpkin, and a golden apple. And we've got our brick golem recipe working perfectly. We can place this guy down. And obviously we're in creative mode. We gotta keep our item, but the brick golem spawn starts animating perfectly, and he's recognizing me as his owner as well, so he'll follow me around. And that means that the New in Town Golems add-on is officially complete. If you'd like to download and play with these golems, please consider joining my Patreon. I'll be giving access to this data pack much earlier than normal ahead of my New in Town Let's Play series that I'll be playing with along with all of these golems. That'll be starting up pretty soon, so don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to get alerted of when those new videos come out. Thanks for watching!